Hello, everybody, and welcome back to ZakIsCinema. Today, we're going to be reviewing and discussing the new movie, Insidious Out of the Further. After the two incredibly forgettable sequels, which made me question whether the Insidious franchise had finally run its course, Insidious Out of the Further really surprised me by bringing me back to the haunted house horror, creepy imagery, and fun mythology that made the original movies so memorable. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. If you have been keeping up with our beautiful Insidious review series or just finding me for the very first time, we have been covering the entire Insidious movie franchise leading up to our brand new one, Insidious Out of the Further. So welcome here. If you have nobody to talk to about Insidious, you have finally found somebody that'll listen to you talk about Insidious. So let's start reviewing and discussing this brand new Insidious movie. Starting with the positives or just the things that I enjoyed most about this new movie. And now going into this one, this movie was not on my radar. I don't think it was on anybody's radar for 2026. I was really not knowing what to expect for the sixth film within this franchise. And I have a lot of nostalgia, especially for the first three movies in this franchise, but this franchise as a whole. And while there are elements of the last two most recent films in this franchise that I somewhat enjoy, overall, they really do feel like forgettable messes of movies. And I really felt like Insidious kind of already ran its course. It came and it went, and it seemed like this new one was just going to be more of the same. However, like I just said, I am very pleased to state that overall this movie was a pretty decent surprise to me. It is a genuinely fun entry that really feels like a return to form for this franchise. And the thing that I'm most excited to discuss with all you lovely people is that, unlike the last two movies, this one finally returns to that fun haunted house experience that made Insidious, especially those first two movies, so effective and so memorable. Throughout this movie has some great scares, some great use of tension, jump scares, and creepy imagery that really just made this premise interesting and fun again, which I think is the biggest positive I can really give this movie. And on top of that, this movie moves at a pretty decent fast pace, and a huge part that I want to credit that towards is how frequently the movie uses its scares and just how entertaining the setup really is. Once it gets going, it barely lets up and is just a fun ride overall to be on. Within its scares, there are plenty of standout sequences, especially that opening sequence, which I found incredible and really reassured me that we actually have people trying with this movie again. The setup is similar to things you've seen before, like recent examples with the Smile movies and the Babadook kind of come to mind for me, but it's still incredibly well done and very effective to me. We follow our main character named Gemma, and the opening takes place 20 years before the primary setting of this movie, and we see Gemma as she is growing up in this childhood home with a mother who constantly appears to be on drugs, kind of strung out and distant both from herself and from her daughter Gemma. And within this opening sequence that is about 10 to 15 minutes long, there are some genuinely creepy scenes that put me in the shoes of this girl Gemma and made me feel that childhood fear of growing up with a parent that is distant and unable to take care of themselves and also unable to take care of their child. So I felt like the movie did an incredible job at really just putting you in that childhood nightmare fueled experience. And the mother in this opening is super effective, very creepy. She does a great job of just being weird while also unsettling, whether she is talking to herself, running around the home barefoot alone late at night, sitting or standing in corners of rooms and living areas, or chasing after her daughter, spouting off nonsense. The opening does a great job at setting up what the horror and scares are really going for in this film, but it also sets up a great emotional arc for Gemma when we see what appears to be her mother later on on in this opening committing what looks like suicide in the bathroom while Gemma is still very young. And this just sets up a great arc because you get that emotional hook with Gemma, this traumatic experience in childhood, and then we pick up with her 20 years later, still living in that same home, but now with a daughter of her own. And it sets up kind of a cliche arc. You kind of figure out where things are going, but that doesn't mean it's not well done. And I found myself rooting for Gemma and her daughter, which I think this movie conveyed pretty effectively here. And on top of the scares and great emotional setup, there are some great standout scenes, especially with the entities itself, which is very important for an Insidious film. And especially because this movie introduces the concept of the entities messing with people in the further, but then also messing with people within the real world. And my favorite scene is this incredible scare where Gemma is looking for her daughter in this couch cushion living room fort setup, a fort setup that I would say 95% of children have that memory and experience of creating. So it kind of plays on that emotion and memory for many of us. And Gemma is looking for her daughter within this couch fort. And once she gets inside this couch fort, the couch and setting and the fort suddenly become endless. They really do a great job at just creating this disorienting, surreal experience, kind of feeling like a couch fort version of the back rooms, that feeling where you're trapped in this disorienting, seemingly infinite space. And throughout the fort, as Gemma's kind of crawling, just trying to find her way out, we see these three old demon people that are throughout the film that we'll get into, but they're like staring at her down these long, endless tunnels and hallways in this couch fort with this barely lit little reading flashlight that Gemma is holding on to. And throughout the sequences, they are kind of popping their heads out. They are crawling and running after her. It is such an intense and creative sequence that I honestly wish the movie did more of this, like messed with our perception of reality and kind of blended the further and the real world without the characters knowing which one they're kind of in. And like I said, there are some great scares in here, especially when they're bringing the demons from the further into the real world. It's a great way to kind of switch up the visual flair and style of this film. We eventually learn that these three old people demons that you see in the trailer and throughout the whole film are actually real life people sedating themselves, allowing spirits from the further to attach themselves to their body so they can use and be used within the real world, and just sets up a interesting dynamic. It sets up a deeper mythology and lore that we haven't really seen explored in this franchise before, and these characters serve a great ongoing presence because it leads to a great scene where one of these old people demon characters show up at the dentist office that Gemma works at, and on top of the creepy demon stuff going on within this dentist sequence, there are some incredibly disturbing sounds and visuals as Gemma is cleaning this dude's mouth, like things that made me audibly react to what was going on screen and kind of look away, making the entire scene just repulsive and unsettling. And on top of that, I really enjoyed our main antagonist here, the demon named Cyrus. And we learn that Cyrus was actually this old cult leader in the real world who helped people use their abilities as these couriers to transfer demons from the further into the real world, almost acting as these real life human vessels. And he is now continuing his work from the further while still influencing his old followers who remain alive in the real world. And I like that it gives this franchise some deeper lore, a little bit of a different angle by making the main demon someone who is also a real person doing evil things and is now a demon spirit person continuing to do these evil things. And on top of that, Cyrus isn't just saved for the third act. He has some great, incredible standout sequences in here, a strong presence, and a fantastic voice. This booming, calming, but unsettling, creepy demon voice. And he has one of my favorite sequences in the entire movie where he is going after Gemma and then going after Gemma's daughter, who is hiding in the closet, holding her neighbor's dog just in fear, hiding from Cyrus. And then Cyrus then disappears while Gemma's daughter is still in the closet holding on to her dog, and then all of a sudden switch places with the dog with Cyrus himself. So then when Gemma's daughter's looking down, she just sees the demon Cyrus sitting in her lap, and then he starts barking like a cartoon dog as he's laying in her lap. It is absolutely hilarious, but then when you stop to think about it, it is straight up fucking disturbing. And on top of that, I also enjoyed how this movie does something different with the idea of the further and the idea of astral projection. We have always known that people like Dalton can just astral project into the further and have that risk of one singular demon attaching itself to them. But this movie kind of introduces the idea of a courier where it is someone who could travel to the further while also bringing things in and out of the further so they can kind of do a mix of both. And this really creates a new danger because these people can essentially be used as a way of demons to transport themselves into the real world. And it's a fresh idea that also leads to some more of these disturbing scenes when especially the demons discover that Gemma's daughter also is a courier and has this ability, and then use her in the third act to start transporting demons one by one into the real world because they recognize and realize that taking advantage of a child is way more easy and effective than taking advantage of an adult. So even just the unsaid and unspoken implications of that idea is incredibly disturbing and leads to a fantastic setup for a third act that I overall enjoy as well. But with that said, let's jump over to the mixed aspects I have for this movie. And unfortunately, I hate to do this to my girl, but I gotta put Elise in here. She should probably go in the negatives here, unfortunately, but I just love Elise that I can't do that to her. But Elise is still obviously very dead in this movie, but she shows up again as this kind of just really writing convenience, unfortunately, and she is used through this tattoo artist named Claire, who Claire feels like she's in a different movie, almost feels like Dalton's roommate from the previous one. And for whatever reason, I guess Elise developed this strong relationship with her and is now using her to communicate to people out in the real world and is communicating to our character of Gemma. And to me, this feels unnecessary because Claire really isn't a character. She's just kind of this communication vessel device for Elise. And that doesn't make much sense because in other movies, I feel like Elise has been able to show up without this vessel device character to speak through. So that just kind of feels frustrating and unnecessary. And I do like using Elise as our navigator for the further, but attaching her to this completely out of place character just didn't really work for me. And they should have just had a more serious, toned down version of Tucker and Specs to reintroduce Elise and her ability to help in these situations. I love Elise, but let's be honest, the franchise has really struggled how to utilize her since her death in the first one. And at this point, she is just starting to feel like more of a writing convenience rather than a character and someone who exists to kind of give characters the answers instead of having the characters kind of do it themselves. And from there, I have to put a small part of Gemma's story with her mother in this mixed section. It's pretty obvious, especially if you've seen these types of movies before or any Insidious movie before, that in the beginning, Gemma's mother wasn't actually this drug addict, or maybe she was to kind of counteract the demons messing with her. But instead, we get this revelation that she is also a courier, someone with these abilities who has been infected and messed with by Cyrus or other demons from the further. And that's exactly what's happening. And you pick up on that within the first 30 seconds seconds of this film. This movie treats it at the end like this big grand revelation, but it basically had no impact on me because it was incredibly obvious. I was honestly confused that they treated it like that because I thought it was just so in your face and not hidden whatsoever. And it's in my mix because I understand the emotional implications and really like how Gemma sometimes feels like she is becoming her mother and treating her daughter the same way her mother treated her. It's a good message about generational trauma, and it's also a storyline, though, at the same time that you've seen so many times before, so many times in other movies, but so many times within this franchise. But with that said, let's jump over to my negatives or the things that I just didn't really like about this movie. And I have to put the boyfriend character in this negative section. I don't even remember his name. I don't even feel like looking it up, but he feels completely useless and never really justifies why he's in the movie. And if anything, I think it would have spent better time and better use of this movie's runtime if the main focus was just on Gemma and her daughter, since they're the main heart and soul of this movie here. Introducing the boyfriend really didn't help anything. They just kind of need a little bit of his help in the third act, but then he gets knocked out halfway through the third act, so it didn't even feel like that was completely necessary. It just kind of felt like a waste and never justified its existence. And I also have to put a small part of the ending in the negatives here because it feels way too rushed and convenient. We find out that since Gemma is a courier and has this ability, that Cyrus has this plan to use her and then eventually her daughter to start transferring demons out into the real world and utilizing his followers to wreak havoc on Earth itself in the real world. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, since Gemma is this courier character, Gemma in the third act, when she's trapped in her house with Cyrus as he's transferring demons utilizing Gemma's daughter, she somehow, without Cyrus's knowledge, lifts her entire house from the real world and then transfers it into the further, trapping all of them there. And that ends up trapping everyone in the further and causes Cyrus's followers to turn on him because they feel like they were lied to. And it's a cool idea, but the movie never really properly set up or explains how Gemma would learn to do this so quickly. It basically feels like she suddenly learned how to control her powers just because the story really needed her to. And the implication of this is Gemma suddenly becomes the most powerful character in the franchise. It's just because the story needed her to, but she never really earned or showcased that ability whatsoever. But with that said, I will say that overall, Insidious Out of the Further is a surprisingly fun return to form that brings back the franchise's haunted house scares, creepy imagery, and fresh mythology, even if it has some of that convenient storytelling and underused characters. Keep it from reaching the level of some of those first few films. But with that said, for my rating for this film, this is a movie that I'd like to own. I'd like to finish out my Insidious franchise physical media collection, but I'd be more comfortable doing it at that discounted price. So you guys have my thoughts here on Insidious Out of the Further. Please down below let me know, what did you think about this brand new Insidious film? Did you agree with my review? Disagree? I'd love to hear all your thoughts and feelings down below. But that's about it. I appreciate anybody watching my videos, so thank you so much. And yeah, look forward to more ZakIsCinema coming very soon.